My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Pirancio Sangran, Guru Piranyo, fellow Jnanis. I hope all of you all are doing very well. Today I'm going to continue with Mahan's chapter 17, which is life. And today we are going to cover on learning from nature. Interesting, we are all part of nature. Nature here means the universe. And we are part and parcel of that nature. And you'll see that, nature is part of us and we are part of nature. And sometimes, nature has a lot of lessons for us to teach us a lot of things. And if we watch carefully, closely, observe it, you see that there are so much divine things that we can learn from nature. The only problem is that sometimes our mind is so preoccupied by frivolous things, transitory things, that we miss that lesson. And today I'm going to speak about life, and the things in life that we want to achieve: peace, tranquility, inspirational life, a life that is, spectacular, a life that is, gives us good understanding of what our life is about, what the purpose of life is. And we see that we live in times which is, quite turbulent, very volatile, sometimes uncertain, sometimes very complex and very ambiguous. And if we don't have the spiritual compass built in us to help us navigate this through, this what we call a VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, we see that sometimes we get lost in all the turbulence, as though we are caught up in a tornado and we don't know what direction to take. We get a lot of, trepidations and worries, and so life could adversely impact the quality of our lives. So we see that, what is it that we can learn? And I think the last satsang I spoke about how life is somewhat like a chariot, and how we need to learn to master this chariot, the journey that we traverse. Sometimes it's going to be easy, sometimes it's going to be rocky, sometimes it's going to be straight, sometimes you're going to have sharp turns, sometimes the path is going to be very slippery. So we need to have full control over our senses, our mind, our intellect, and also learn to listen to the self and learn to listen to nature. And today we are going to speak about how nature, we've got to be attuned to nature. And I want to start off with this beautiful quote by Eckhart Tolle, which says that, learn from nature and see how everything gets accomplished and how the miracle of life unfolds without dissatisfaction or unhappiness. So what he's saying here is that nature just unfolds in a natural way. And we don't have to be worried, or we don't have to have the trepidation, we don't have to have that unhappiness in us. And we've also seen this quote in many of the other satsangs, which says that, both the sukhas and the dukkha of life can be and are important combustion for our own enlightenment. But we need to learn to tune on to nature. And the way to tune on to the nature, the expansive nature, is to be able to be aware of nature itself within all of us. Nature is infinite. Nature is, unlimited. Nature is everywhere. And the closest thing for us to understand about nature is the natural, substratum in all of us. And I'll show you how nature actually reveals this truth to us if we stay attuned. And I'm going to show you some examples of how we need to think in a way that is very nature-centric. So I'm going to talk about the earth, the place that we live. Have we ever thought about earth and how earth is related to us? Of course, our whole body is constructed from earth itself. And if you see the plants, the bacteria, which the plants that we eat and the bacteria in our yogurt, everything that earth provides, the minerals, constructs our body. And we see that, those minerals, has vibration, has resonance. And this is where one needs to look at nature in a very, scientific, in a very systematic way to say, hey, nature has all these qualities. Do these qualities present in us? And you see that if you understand nature very well, you see that slowly through the introspective perspective, you'll see that it's also imprinted in all of us. That gives us illumination on how the wisdom, knowledge of nature, earth, the gravitational force is embedded in us, and how do we harness that power. So I'm going to start with some nice pictures to show you what earth looks like. And there are some interesting qualities of earth that is embedded in all of us, and sometimes we miss it, right? Earth has many layers. You've got the surface, we've got the mantle, you've got the outer core, and then you've got the inner core. In that same way, we too have an outer core, and we have a much more layered, substratum until we come to that inner core, right? And this inner core is what great saints and sages try to get to. And there's some interesting properties that the Earth's core has that is also embedded in our own core. And I'll take you through this. If you see, on the surface of the Earth's core, we see that, gravity, we have gravitational force. And of course, the gravitational force comes from, the core. The core generates, this gravitational force. And of course, the surface is also impacted by the gravitational force of the moon and other celestial beings. Now, we see that, if you look at the surface of Earth, objects travel at about 9.8 meters per second. So and where does that come from? So if you throw an object, it's pulled down by Earth, right? It falls down to the Earth at the speed of that 9.8 meters per second. The reason for that is that there's a physics behind this, is that Earth has gravitational force, which has a pull force, and every object in this universe exerts, push and pull forces. Similarly, like how the moon exerts gravitational force on the Earth and vice versa. So every object, but because the moon is much more bigger, it's, it doesn't crash to the Earth. But we see that, as human beings having a matter body, if we go up, our gravitational force, electromagnetic force, is not strong enough to withstand the pull of Earth. So that's why we fall, right? Any objects we throw, it falls. The sun doesn't fall on the Earth. So we see that, the mass that the objects have, that with the gravitational force keeps it in sync, or it gets pulled. So in that same way, we see that, at the surface of our own personality, we have that push and pull forces. Something very interesting that we observe in the Earth is that as you go deeper, you see something that the gravitational force starts dissipating until at the core, the gravitational force or the speed is actually zero. The reason for that is that at the surface, you have only Earth in your feet, and it's pulling. But at the core, everywhere Earth is present. So at every place, right, left, top, bottom, they're all exerting the same force. So there is a balance. you know, there is a state of balance that happens where everything is equally having an impact on you. And this is quite interesting that, you know, in our life, sometimes we like things and we don't like things. We pull the things that we like and the things that we don't like. So there's this push-pull forces. But we've also heard this state where at the core, the push-pull forces are equal. That state, beautiful state, what we call samatva, the state of equanimity. So as we go to the core of the earth, you see that the gravitational pull dissipates, they become equal. So the centrifugal and centripetal force are equal. The sukha dukkha's are equal, right? So this is really fascinating because as we go deeper and deeper, we see that in the surface, we push the dukkhas, the things that gives us challenges, but we pull the things that we want. So this push-pull forces goes through. So our mind goes through this turbulence. But as we go deeper and deeper, we see that there is a sense of balance, a sense of serenity. The push-pull forces ultimately stops. Right? And that going deep down within, that is why even Swami says, you know, within me, I discovered everything, you know, the mind is no more in the state of flux. And this is what we see in how we see on the earth surface, there is this pull forces to gravity, but at the core, the gravity is zero. The push-pull force becomes one. In that same way, we see that the human personality at the surface, it experiences all this gravity of materiality, you know, hot, cold, push, pull, all those things. But when the mind starts going deep down, we see that that pull of that material world dissipates. So we call this that transcendental state, the state where everything is in equibalence. The mind becomes, you know, composed. The mind becomes peaceful. The mind is not impacted by this push-pull forces. Why is this the case? If you see very clearly, I said that our body is constructed from the earth itself. The earth has this quality. Every molecules and every cells have a similar property. At the surface, things happen, but as you go to the core, at the nucleus, you see the similar patterns happening. And this is not surprising that we are made out of that. And that same DNA is imprinted in us. So that is why when we go deep down, the turbulence starts dissipating. And it's a nice parallel to show that, you know, as long as we are in the surface of our existence, we will be caught up by this sukha dukkhas and this push-pull forces. But as our mind descends deeper and deeper within ourselves every day, and it learns to harness this balance. So even though you come back to that surface, you see that while the material personality you experience, but that balance is still present. And this is what that mastery of that, you know, going to the core. Here, when we mean going to the core, is that as long as we are in the surface, we are caught up by the small I personality. As we go deep down to the core, we get to the big I personality. And that is that transcendental, the eternal state of existence. So this is what we see, that the physics of this material, and the same thing also you see in the sun. If you decipher the sun, the same thing you see in every planets, every galaxy, everything, including our cell and molecules and atoms, all have this DNA. But unfortunately, the human mind misses this. When the human mind sees this nature is imprinted in everything, from the macrocosm to the microcosm, and the mind learns to harness this going deep within its core, the mind attains the qualities of that core, which is transcendental. So this is what we see in the context of the earth, the core of the earth. But something also we see that, on the earth, so earth is really a fantastic model to study. If you see, as long as we are in the surface, gravity pulls. But the opposite is also true. Instead of going to the core, now we want to be able to beat gravity. And there is a kind of substratum where, as long as you're in that substratum, you're caught up by this gravitational force or the material gravity. But if we are able to beat that gravity past the threshold, that the pull of gravity is, neutralized, and we do that, and we human beings know how to do this. So we use rocket boosters, we send our probes, and in the initial phase, the thrusters is enormous. I'm not sure if you've seen how the space shuttle and the rockets, the amount of energy that is needed to break away from gravity. I always say this, when I see the space shuttle trying to ascend to the heavens, the two thrusters will be putting so much energy to break away from that gravity. And, we see that the higher you go, as long as you are in that the substratum where gravitational force is there, it's going to have enormous impact. The further you go, the pull is going to be stronger. And that is why if there's no energy to keep it afloat, it falls down, and the energy that accumulates, and when it hits the ground, it's shattered. So to break away, from the Earth's gravity, we use rocket boosters. So the space shuttle used 2 rocket boosters. I call this the Viveka and the Vairagya. So in our mind, in the same way, our human mind is caught up by materiality, and we try to break away from it. And the more you try to break away, the more the thoughts come out, and the more the pull is. And that's why, sometimes disciples say that when Guru, we are trying to meditate, we have a lot more thoughts. It's hard to get to this sublime state because so much thoughts come in. So it's very similar to the space shuttle trying to break away from gravity, but it requires a fair bit of, rocket boosters. So here, Viveka and Vairagya is very important. And what this is essentially to understand the forces of life, the forces of the material world, like how scientists understand the forces of gravity and how much rocket boosters that you need to break and how long. And something beautiful happened. The moment the moment the space shuttle beats that gravity phase, the rocket boosters drop off, and then you see that the space shuttle, has minimal effort to navigate itself to wherever it wants to go. In that same way, the human mind finds it very difficult to break away from the gravity of materiality. But through Viveka is this rocket booster that enables us to discriminate between what is real and what is unreal, what is permanent and what is impermanent. So every thought that comes through the mind, it'll say, look, why is it here? What's causing this here? And this is what, if it's not relevant, cast it aside. If it's relevant, you integrate it to make the mind expanded. Vairagya is not to be caught up in these thoughts. It's not easy. Similar like the rocket booster, a lot of effort is needed to be able to harness that qualities of Viveka and Vairagya. And as you do that daily, you see that material imprint, the gravity of materiality slowly starts dissipating. And one fine day, you see that there is glimpses between thoughts, glimpses of gaps, and that starts expanding. And one fine day, suddenly you see, hey, there is no thoughts here. What's happening? So you've beaten that gravity of materiality. So we see that Once you beat that gravity of materiality, something very interesting happens. Your experience starts changing. The transcendental quality, you feel more peaceful, not impacted by the push and pull forces. It's a beautiful quietude that one attains. And you see that your face glows. There's a tejas that happens. You yourself realize, oh my God, look at the glow, and you feel more peaceful, somewhat like the rocket boosters that slowly navigates the space shuttle, and you can go anywhere you want without effortless. So, and this beautiful transcendental, what we call that enlightenment phase. The mind attains that enlightenment phase. What that means is the mind becomes light, frictionless, and not impacted by the sukha dukkha's or the karmic laws. And you see that, but this requires a fair bit of effort to break away from this materiality. And you see that, you stop giving excuses for not doing it. You just do it. And once you get it, nothing stops it. So we see this earth model both at the core, that you get to that kind of quietude state, the state of silence, the state of beautiful transcendental, which powers everything on the surface. And in the same way, we see that when we break that barrier of that material gravity through our rocket boosters of Viveka and Vairagya, we see that we attain that beautiful, subliminal state that you can travel without, being impacted by the forces of gravity or the forces of materiality. So we see this, and you see that, that's why observing nature is very, very important, right? And as I said, when you observe the forces of the earth, you see that you learn from it, you attain that beautiful state. In that same way, there are some nice quotes that, as you progress in your spiritual journey, not just look at the earth, but every celestial beings. And this is why we see that in great scriptures, these celestial entities are characterized as gods with certain qualities, But let's keep that aside. But look at nature itself. Look at the sun, right? So if our mind, attains the state of the sun, you see that the mind would not discriminate anything. The sun, if the mind becomes like the sun, the mind shines equally to everyone, treats everyone equally. The lake that is dirty and the lake that is clean gets the same amount of, sunshine. This says that the sun does not shine for a few trees and flowers, right? You don't only do it for yourself and your family, but you do it liberally for everyone. And you see that your mind becomes, more and more universal. And that's what, if you observe the sun, this is what the sun in the Gayatri mantra, it talks about the sun. Actually, when you discover the sun within you, you see that as how that's the external sun shines beautifully for everyone equally. In the same way, the internal sun not only gives you consciousness of the external sun, but treats everything equally. And that's what this quote beautifully by Henry Ward Beecher says, that the sun does not shine for a few trees and flowers, but for the wide world's joy. So it's that universality that one will only attain this when the mind goes to the core of itself, where the gravity of materiality is zero, or when the mind beats the gravity of materiality to a substratum that is beyond its being caught up in this material force. The other beautiful part when you get to the core and to beating that gravity phase is this thing. You see that, the mind becomes more universal. The mind learns to appreciate nature in its awesome beauty. Even the blemishes is an awesome beauty. And I love this quote. It says that in nature, nothing is perfect and everything is perfect. Sounds like contradiction. but it is not, right? It shows that sometimes the trees can be contorted and bent, but it's bent in its own weird ways, and they're still beautiful. Beautiful, quote by Alice Walker. And this reminded me of Ashtavakra, the great saint, which had 8 bends in his body. And many people are laughing at him because they didn't understand this, philosophy that, nothing is perfect and everything is perfect. His body was bent, everybody was laughing at him. And he turned around and laughed at everyone to say, you all don't understand that the body, the bended body is not my responsibility. I didn't cause it. But you're laughing as though it is my cause. But that which is not bended in me is my mind, right? So, and he's saying that unfortunately, all of you all have a straight body, but you have a bended mind. And here, this, helps us remind us that, there is nothing in this universe that is, imperfect. It comes from that perfect, universal creator. That is why we see that even when people have all kinds of challenges in life, we see that, you can dwell on the challenges, you can dwell on the scars, and you would not learn from those scars or the challenges. But the day we see that how the scars are also part of that perfection, and I'm going to use that as a foundation for transformation and development, you see the scars become stars. When you also, when there are many people say, oh, I can't do this, this is hard, and you see that the moment you do that, you've already defeated yourself. But you say, no, this is a challenge, but, I have the capacity and capability to do it. You see that you transcend and start seeing, wow, in spite of this, there's something awesome and beautiful things that in this, difference, in this contortion, into this complexity, into this VUCA world, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Sounds challenging, but in the challenges comes opportunities for learning, discovery, and the discovery of one's own, infinite possibilities and potentialities. If one lives that way, looking at nature and seeing how nature navigates the changes, navigates the winds and navigates the pressures and, beautifully curating itself, and reaching out to the universe. And if our mind can do that, if our mind can learn from nature, you see that the mind will become universal. And this is what life is about, is to be able to not complain and not, look at things in a very limited and kind of negative way, but everything has happened for a reason. And that's why Swamiji says very beautifully, Nadadadalam nanmeki, nadakka pordum nanmeki. Whatever that has happened is for the greater good. Whatever that is going to happen is also for the greater good. And Swamiji also, says another important quote. This is the perspective of life when you learn from nature. When you become nature-centric, it says that kuraya nivrtika kuriya kurale kadavul. He says that one who is able to transcend their own challenges is God incarnated. They will discover God. That same quote has another important meaning, is that one who is able to dispel the ignorance and challenges of others are also God incarnated. God here means the discovery of the Creator. And this is a very important perspective of life that I've learned from Mahan's teachings. And I hope that today's satsang, helps you to, discover yourself, the natural self, through observing nature very, very carefully. Santosham.